afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So today we are advancing on the same series at part 6, and we will draw a lot upon what we spoke of in part 5. So this is going to be a short one today. So the last time around we spoke about how do we shift into a high performance state. And when we mean high performance in any area. It could be high performance at work, it could be high performance in a speech, a presentation, or a conversation in a relationship, or just feel good, right? When you're feeling down and you want to feel better, that could be a high performance state as well. So it's not necessarily performance in a particular context. So what we're talking about today, the Stroop effect, is one of the many tools in order to shift into a high performance state. So we're drawing a lot upon what we've already discussed. So the basis of what we spoke about in terms of how do we get to a high performance state was this chain of excellence that we spoke about in the talk about the last, the alphabet game as well. So what we're talking about here is that the premise is that performance in any area of life is a function of the state that we are in, the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual state that we are in at any moment in time. The state leads to a certain performance. Right? The state, on the other hand, is a function of our physiology, the way our physical body is, and the physical body, of course, also contains and is a container for our emotion, our thoughts, and so on. And therefore, an ailing body obviously cannot lead to great performance because it hinders it in a certain way. Not that performance is not possible in an ailing body, it just takes that much more effort to be able to compensate for the ailment. And the physiology, on the other hand, to a great degree is a function of our respiration. So how well do we take in breath? Breath, one, in the physical sense of the term, two, also breath as prana, as it is termed in the Indian texts. So prana, not just in terms of air that is taken in, but life force that is taken in. How much do we receive from our environment? So receive could mean receive in terms of love, receive in terms of affection, support, things that facilitate our life. How much are we able to acknowledge and receive that? And having received it, allow it to nourish us, nourish the physiology, and in the process get into a good state of being and therefore do well for the world. So the way I look at the chain of excellence is it's a chain from receiving to giving back to the world. Performance in a sense is about our contribution to the world, our service to the world. So how do we receive and how do we give and how do we keep that cycle alive is what we're talking about in the chain of excellence. So the new Code NLP, which is the basis of most of the talks in this series, is focused a lot on working with the unconscious. We can, if we look at NLP processes and techniques, they work at both levels. There is the conscious and there is the unconscious aspect of it. New Code largely focuses on the unconscious, and the idea is to utilize the unconscious to bring about changes in whatever areas of life that we choose to change. And how it works is it activates neurological circuits, and those circuits then facilitate the change that we speak about. And therefore the context of the change needs to be identified. We don't necessarily need to identify the story behind it. So we go back to the idea of process content distinction that we started the series with, that we don't necessarily need to get into the content of life in order to be able to change it. We don't need to get into the story, the drama of it, but simply to say that this process in my life is not working. There's a pattern around my behavior, my performance, my relationships, and how do I shift the process without really getting into the content of it. And which is where we don't involve the conscious so much, we deal largely with the unconscious. So we go straight into the game that we are talking about today. With any new code game, and we spoke about it the last time as well, the format is first we choose we decide on what is the context that I want to work on. So if there is an important game for me to play, let's say I have a tennis match to play and I want to do it well, we first select from the third position. Third position is the fly on the wall position, right? So we're looking at ourselves as a neutral observer. It's a disassociated state, right? So it certainly helps when we're doing any of these games to, one, have a physical space that we're not disturbed in, maybe a closed room ideally, and anchor spaces. So I might anchor and say this is third position, right? So third position is a position where I look into my own life like a camera would look at, right? And I say that, hey, I've got this tennis match today and it's with this particular opponent. These are the strengths of the opponent, these are my strengths, these are my flaws, and these are things I might need to do well in order to fare well in the match today. So the third position looks at what is my context. And without getting distracted, without stepping into anything else, from third position I go and step into first position. Right? In the third position I'm looking at myself as an observer. First position, I allow myself to experience me in the context of the performance. Right? So in this case I might want to experience how I feel in the context of the tennis match. So allow my body to slip into that zone of the match. How does my body feel? Does it feel tense? Does it feel easy, loose? Are there jitters? Am I feeling some contractions? Am I feeling, do I feel my reflexes are sharp? Do I feel I'm lagging? So I allow myself in the first position to experience the physiology, the body state of how I would feel before that match and in that match. I'm imagining it, of course. I also allow myself to feel the experience, which may, the emotions, which could include some bit of anxiety, nervousness, jitters. It may sometimes also have a sense of exhilaration, looking forward to it. So I may have a mix of emotions, and that's okay. I also allow myself in this state to experience the thoughts. Thoughts could be about myself in terms of how I think I might fare in the match, what I might need to do, what my strategy could be, what I think about the opponent, the surface, all of that. Okay? So obviously when we're doing this in practicality, both of these are going to be silent spaces. In the third position, as a fly on the wall, I just look at myself, imagine myself looking at myself. The first position, I actually allow myself to experience it for a few moments, experience the context for a few moments. And once I believe I've completely immersed in the context, I feel just like I would feel before the first ball is served in the match, I step out of first position and break state. Right? And the separator state, the breaking state is important because ultimately I'm very conscious in the first position. Our aim is to work with the unconscious. So we totally break state from there, and break state could mean physically shaking up, right? Shake your hands, legs. If possible, go for a walk and come back, sing, whatever, anything that works to totally break the state for just 1 or 2 minutes. And then the fourth step is go straight into the game. The last time we spoke about the alphabet game. So for us to be able to do this, it's important that whatever game you're planning to use, set it up before you start the third position, before you start that first step. Right? Which means you've set it all up in one room, you've identified third position, you've identified first position, you've set up the game somewhere, and you've got enough space to break state and come back. Yeah. And having broken state, you go straight into the game, and the game needs to be played. Most of these new code games need to be played for 10-15 minutes straight. No distractions, no talking to anybody, no breaks, no mobile phones and all of that. You're only focused on the game till the time you're completely in a state of what might feel like a trance. You're completely in the zone of the game. Some of the games are more difficult than others. It depends on our individual wiring of the brain. And once you've completed the game, then we go back into first position, right? No conversations, nothing. Once we've gone into the trance state, 10-15 minutes after the game, go straight into the first position and then reimagine starting that match. And reimagine whatever it is that I need to reimagine in terms of strategies I might need to use, any ideas I might have about how to tackle the opponent, how to perform well. So allow myself to completely soak in the anchor, the spatial anchor of the first position. I induce the high performance state that's already been gotten into through the game. I induce that into the space of that performance. And then, of course, if it's a real life tennis match, I might want to do this a few times before I actually go into the match. But it's just as powerful even if you do
it. Second time we have to actually go into the game. First time not game, before game. No, when it's first time, before playing the game.
Game as in you're talking about before game.
First time, just you have to experience the state before the actual match or something.
Yes.
And second time after the game, you have to experience the match.
Yeah, I may or may not directly be able to go into the match, but I still anchor myself and take myself mentally back into the position. Yeah. See, it's like if I'm doing this before an office presentation, a presentation at work, I may not necessarily be able to do this in office, right? I might do it at home.
Right.
So what I'm getting into, and therefore the establishment of the spatial anchor to say that this represents the match. Yeah. This represents the you know, speech or the presentation. And therefore, in this space, I anchor the high performance. So that in reality, when I enter the performance zone, I take this. I take this because the spatial anchor is established. So that's the format, and the sanctity of the format needs to be maintained for us to be able to use the performance state very well. So that's as far as the...
But here we need not anchor ourselves, something like that or something.
The space is the anchor.
Space is the anchor.
Yeah, the space is the anchor.
But when you are actually experiencing, at that time that space is not there.
Yeah, but what I've done in the process is using the space as an anchor, I've altered my physiology.
Okay.
See, the first time, step 2, when I experienced myself, I may have experienced anxiety, nervousness, lack of confidence and all of that. Whereas the second time, having induced the high performance state through the game, I'm experiencing confidence, I'm experiencing alignment because the brain circuits have rewired. I'm far more aligned and coordinated. So now I'm experiencing confidence, high reflexes, strategies that may have not occurred to me earlier because I was not thinking of strategies, I was busy thinking of lack of confidence. Right? So the right ideas and the right physiology comes into place. The body language changes the second time I'm here.
But in that stage we need not anchor ourselves like we do in something.
We can add anchors if that's possible. Yeah, like we may add anchors which could be as simple as holding in a certain way, tapping ourselves in a certain way. A word that can become an anchor, and I can remember it during the match. So it could be a verbal anchor, it could be a physical anchor, it could be a visual anchor if that works. Right? Any kind of an anchor can work. But the space in itself anchors into the physiology. So what we are ultimately using in performance is the physiology. Physiology and the heightened mental state. The mental state is what we use in performance. But yes, you can actually, like you say, you can integrate all kinds of anchors into it. Visual, spatial, verbal, anything. Kinesthetic anchors, the kind of feeling I might get. Any of those can help. Or even a consumption anchor, like for example, if I were to stand there and have some water, and if that water is accessible even when I'm doing the performance, then that becomes an anchor.
What do you mean by anchor then?
Anchor is something that holds a certain state of being. Like how as a baby when you're held, that touch for the baby means that I'm safe. Somebody is taking care of me, right? And therefore, even as an adult, when someone hugs us, there is that feeling of saying I'm safe, someone's caring for me. That's become a physical anchor. the touch holds a certain meaning. So touch, for example, is a kinesthetic anchor. Similarly, you can have a visual anchor, you can have a verbal anchor, a spatial anchor, right? Like or a smell that becomes an anchor. Like sometimes you hear a certain piece of music or you smell something, and you're taken back to a totally irrelevant situation.
It's association.
So
It connects.
there is a connection that gets made. So here when we are using an anchor, we are saying that this anchor holds high performance. So then when we tap into that anchor later, that performance gets generated because an association has been created. So
But that will persist. The
yes,
association or
because you're creating it in the unconscious, you're not creating
it
it
will be
conscious.
discharged and then again recharged.
Well, unless your state is absolutely disturbed for whatever reason in the interim between this and the actual performance, then you might want to redo this quickly before you actually perform. But otherwise, yeah, for most parts, the unconscious retains the anchor. See, it's not something we're consciously feeding. So a lot of times, once I play the game and come into the first position, I may not logically know what is happening to me. Sometimes yeah, I may get very clear strategies of how to perform. Sometimes I may not, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But the body is getting anchored into the position. So that's the format, and it's important to stick to the format. So what is it that we do in step 4 is what can get altered. Any kind of new code game can be looked at. The last time we spoke about the alphabet game, where we spoke about saying out the letters A to Z and in coordination moving hands and then legs. What we are speaking about today is a similar one, which is based on the idea of the Stroop effect. Right? It's a game like the alphabet game. This is called the Stroop effect because we give the brain two kinds of inputs, and the brain has to make a choice, trained to make a choice between the two inputs. Okay? So in this case, what we are saying is you have to read the color of the word on the screen, not the word, the color of the word. Right? The brain is getting two inputs, and that's the Stroop there. That it's getting the word and it's getting the color, but it's told you choose the color.
Right.
You interpret the color is what it's told, and therefore the brain is constantly making a choice. For every word, it's making that choice to say I don't see the word, I see the color, and it's complex. So in that sense, personally I find this a little more challenging than the alphabet game. If I try this, it usually takes me like a good 20 minutes to really get into the zone of it.
Immediately blue, you say blue, no, not yellow.
Yeah. So, of course, like the alphabet game, the beauty of this is you can create your own chart and put it up somewhere. It's a very easy do-it-yourself thing, so you can do it, you can use it quite easily. So, multiple layers of challenge can be added into it for you to get into the zone. First step, of course, is simply to read the state the color, right? Not the word, state the color. So we go green, blue, red, blue, red, yellow. So the first round is usually very slow, and often we have to restart. Like with all new code games, it's important that if you make a mistake, please go back, restart. That's critical because we are also training ourselves to, one, learn to receive feedback, two, to be very alert to our own performance. It's very important for me to realize when I make a mistake in performance so that I recover easily. If I make a mistake and then keep going, then I'm also teaching my unconscious that it's okay. And that's not what we want to teach ourselves, right? It's a dangerous message going into the unconscious. Yeah. Then I'm telling myself that mistakes are okay, and in the process I'm saying I will continue to make mistakes, and that's not the point of high performance, right? So it's very important that
But
we
no time
go
limit.
back. No time limit, but it needs to be reasonably fast. Now, I can't have a 5-second gap between each word, right? So yeah, we might start a little slow, but then the idea is to speed up as much as possible. It helps to have an observer if you're not very confident of stopping ourselves and while identifying mistakes. But we get very critical that the observer just holds space, doesn't engage in conversation.
Maybe for self-assessment, stopwatch or something.
For time?
Time, just whether you're on the slowly, time is reducing or not.
You may want to do that so long as you're not getting out of the state.
Otherwise you will be.
Yeah, you can't be monitoring the stopwatch in between. If you're ready to start and leave it alone, that's okay. But yeah, otherwise it helps to have an observer who can do that for you if at all. But this is not so much about the time. Yeah, the idea is to speed up, but it's not you don't need to reach a specific time target really.
So once you get familiar, automatically your speed increases without you realizing.
It does, and therefore to induce higher performance states, you keep adding layers of challenges to it. So once I do this maybe 4-5 times, I might probably get to a state where I'm reading the colors without making a mistake. Once I've done that, then I add a layer of challenge to it. Now, you could do reverse, but reverse in this case is not very challenging. In the alphabet game, reverse can be challenging because we're not used to the Z to A in reverse. Right? Here, because it's just random colors, it doesn't make a difference to us. So here, a layer of challenge that we now add is physical movement. Right? So we've got 4 colors on screen. We've got red, yellow, green and blue. So for each color, we assign a movement. So let's say red, green, blue, yellow. Right? So then the idea is every time I read, I have to use the assigned movement, right? Which becomes very challenging. One, there are 4 things I have to remember what is it that I've assigned to which movement, and then get it right. So what did I say for green? Green. So let's say if I start with, green was both, right? So let's say green, blue, red, blue, red, yellow, green. So goes on. So that becomes an additional layer and it takes a while to get there. So every time we believe we're peaking, which means we're getting it right, we add a layer of challenge. If we think that after a few minutes of, again, very consistent, non-distracted practice, we're able to get this coordination right as well, which means we are involving 2 functions. We are using the visual cortex, we're using speech, right? We are of course hearing ourselves. We are involved in psychomotor skills of choosing which hand and which movement. Now we can also add psychomotor coordination. So red, right? So you're actually inducing movement. So again, normally the coordination piece, I mean you can do the same part of the body as well, but to make it challenging, you cross it, right? So if I'm snapping the left finger, then the right leg. Both. And then for the clap, you'll have to jump or something. Yeah? So, add to the psychomotor coordination. So, this, to be able to completely do the full cycle, it takes a good 20 minutes to get it right and get it with a reasonable sense of speed. If you're going ultra slow, then you're losing the point here. Right? The idea is to really work with the unconscious. If you're going too slow, the conscious will kick in. Right? So do it at a reasonable speed. And at the end of it, when you're actually doing it, you might feel a sense of physical tiredness. That's okay, because it's humongous amount of coordination that's happening when you're doing this piece. And if you're adding those layers of physical variables. But at the end of it, you're in alignment in a way that is stupendous. Because the amount of left brain, right brain activity that happens and the crisscross alignment that happens, at the end of it, you're like completely centered. It's like a very heightened state of meditation.
It's
So-
good for neurological patients.
Absolutely, it's wonderful for any kind of. I'm not really used it for Alzheimer's or dementia, but I'm sure if it's done at early stages, it works wonders. And for anybody going through any kind of physiotherapy, if their physiology allows some bit of movement, it's beautiful to bring back a sense of balance. Especially when you've had falls and there is a sense of imbalance that happens, back injuries and knee injuries and all that, it helps to bring back a sense of alignment. A lot more confidence when you're walking. So it can be used for multiple states, even something like just regaining physical balance is a high state of performance.
Now, how long will it take? With this activity?
It depends. I've seen people getting it right in like 10 minutes. Personally, I take a good half an hour if I do this. So I guess it depends on.
Balance, no? Body balance after the injury.
That you'll have to do this repeatedly, so at least once a day for a week or so. Yeah. So again, you follow the same process. So in the third position, you identify that the context is to regain balance after the injury. First position, you allow yourselves to experience the injury and how you feel, the pain and the ache and the fear and all of that. Then break state, go do the game, and then come back into first position and allow the body to absorb the alignment that has come in through the game. Right? So going back into first position, and then the body is reassociating. So the earlier association in first position was with pain, with imbalance and all that. Now you're changing the association to saying I'm feeling balanced, very coordinated, very aligned, more physically confident. So yeah, it can be a powerful usage in that context. So color game, I'm not sure what the so there's been attempt to research in terms of what kind of people seem to get it right more easily than others, but we don't really have any clear evidence of what it is about. There is of course some amount of influence of how soon the visual cortex processes colors and words and how that decision gets made. But some people seem to get it more easily than others. Like personally for me, I get the alphabet game easily, I don't get this easily. It takes a long while. But I've seen a lot of people get this very quick. But yeah, every time I've got into it, it induces a really high state of performance. And then a whole lot gets done in a very short span of time because there's total alignment. Physically, mentally, emotionally, there's an absolute sense of balance that comes in. It's very normal that at the end of it you may feel physically tired. You don't need to be worried about it, that there's a whole lot of neural activity that's happened. It helps to drink a glass of water after you've completely finished, just to make yourself feel better. But yeah, overall, very powerful exercise to look at. Even in general, I mean, sometimes even if I don't have a high performance state to achieve, I do it instead of meditation. It just gets into a nice state of balance. And it's a fun way of getting into the balance. And also it helps me to, especially on days where I'm mentally feeling too agitated to meditate or I'm going all over the place mentally, it helps to consume that energy by doing the activity. The physical energy gets channelized and it comes into a space of centeredness.
What about sleep if you...
Not a good idea to do this before sleep. Any new code games, don't do it before sleep because you feel very energized after.
agitated.
Yeah. So during the day is
You
okay.
get tired, so I thought if you do and then immediate sleep.
No, you get physically tired, but you're also very charged. Right? The physical tiredness is because I'm doing all this movement, right? So there is that sense of physical movement, but you're very charged at the end of it. You'll probably be bursting with ideas. So.
Then too you can't sleep.
Yeah. So don't
not
use
do
it.
at night.
Yeah, don't do it. In the day is okay. Don't do it before sleep. It leaves you in a very high state. Good idea to do this early. If you want to do an early practice, like a regular practice of it, do it first thing in the morning instead of doing it while asleep. So this of course is easy to create. You just need paper and colored pens to be able to do this. Have a random mix of colors and words. Yes?
Yeah, yes, I think if you do this activity, your observation becomes very keen.
Oh yes.
Because normally what happens like here there is a illusion also. The word is something and color is different. Like,
and that is the stroop, no?
And,
The brain is making a decision between the word and the color.
I just remember one example where we say what the other person do, like touch your head, touch your ear, touch your nose, then touch your boat, but somebody touch here. So we also automatically do that thing.
Yeah.
Like it happens.
So that's it. The brain is being asked to say there is a visual. There's a visual input there, but you have to choose between the visual inputs. There are two inputs coming in at you. You have to make a choice.
You will not get distracted. It's gut feeling also. Sometimes it's kind of differentiation.
That's the unconscious stepping in, because the conscious mind has been taught to read words. Right? So left to ourselves, we'll read the words, but we're tapping into the unconscious, not into the conscious. So, and that's where it's feeling a little challenge to look at how do I make that choice very quickly.
Come out, break the pattern.
I just want to ask you, any particular reason you have chosen only 4 colors?
It gets very complex otherwise to add physical movements. Unless you feel absolutely non-challenged by it, you're able to get through this easily, then you can add the variables. You can add multiple colors, you can add various physical movements, you can assign a dance step to each movement kind of a thing. So then it becomes a lot more challenging. But usually for most parts, people who like to start with this try and use only 3, not even 4 colors.
Yes. 4 is
3 is challenging enough.
Yeah, this is more challenging.
See, because you're remembering multiple things while you're doing this, right? One, you're remembering the instruction of reading the color, interpreting the color. Second, you're trying to remember what movement have you assigned to which. Then third, you're trying to remember which movements to coordinate. So it's a whole lot already.
Yes.
So ideally start with 3 and then you can increase the combinations.
Yeah, you can play musical notes. Like where notes are different, like there is quarter note, half note, dotted note and whole note. So the activity also over there is somewhat, I think, seems like this.
Yeah.
Because you do multiple things.
Yes. Yeah. It's like adding layers of challenges to
then
the
you
same.
play with right hand, left hand, if you have to piano.
Yeah, when you're reading the when you're playing the piano, you're taught to add those layers of challenges. Yeah. So yeah, that's the color game. That's the Stroop effect that I had to share. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.